Okay, welcome back to Many Mind Therapy Hub. Today it's just Rosie and I, and I'm actually kind of excited about today, Rosie.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of curious because I know you are a certified, help me out,
Body
body
trust provider.
trust provider,
Yeah.
and I don't think we've ever actually just sat down and really had it like deep conversation about it. So I'm really curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was something that a training that I did through the Center for Body Trust. And
Hmm.
it's, it's really expansive and comprehensive and it's a lot. And I know there's like a lot I won't be able to
Yeah.
cover or really do justice to. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
In
really
just a few minutes.
yeah, for sure. In one little episode, but I think I'm so in love with that
Hmm.
company and the training is really deep and meaningful. Definitely is one that kind of
Hmm.
makes you do your own healing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe just to help us understand a little bit, just can you give us like a few sentences of what is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The training is really like coming to it helps clinicians to support clients in coming to peace with their body or coming to peace with living in a marginalized body. And a lot of the
Mm.
has to do with, you know, living in a larger body or experiencing body shaming or, you know, like things that make it feel unsafe to be in your body and the world. And
Mm. Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a pretty radical, beautiful way of kind of being in the world because there's, you know, diet culture is the water that we swim in. So
Yeah.
breaking up with diet culture and kind of finding a way to be at peace in your body is definitely it's pretty radical, really.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you get into it? Like, what drove you to say, okay, this is something that it looks really amazing, and
Yeah.
I just really want to dive into it.
Well, I think in my own kind of healing journey
Hmm.
of coming to peace with my body and kind of like healing my disordered relationship with food, I just started to look more and more into health at every size and intuitive eating and
Hmm.
kind of like fat activism and fat liberation. And the more that I looked into that, the more that I started hearing like these people that I really respected, um, these fat activists talking about this particular training. And I think it was like all of these people that I really looked up to, like Dr.
Hmm.
Sang and Dawn Sarah, and just like a lot of really phenomenal thought leaders in the field were talking about this training. And I started to get really curious about it. And I think originally um, I did a training called God, what was that called? It was through or the body positive. That's what it was. And that
Hmm.
was like a training that taught you how to teach a group through this manual. And it
Okay.
was, you know, it was a good like intro, but this isn't body positivity. It goes beyond that. I think there's
Okay.
in body positivity, there's that was originally like a movement that was started by fat activists, but it was co opted by mainly the people that are centered in that movement now
Mm.
are, you know, if they're plus size, they're smaller on the spectrum of plus sized, and usually white and usually cis, and just not as much diversity as it
Okay.
originally had been intended for. A lot of the people that it was meant for, the most marginalized people, the people in the largest bodies, the fattest bodies, and
Hmm.
people with, you know, disabilities, or, you know, they started kind of getting pushed to the fringes of that movement. And so fat liberation is not just about like, let's be positive about our bodies. It's more about like, let's make a world where everyone gets to be free and safe in their bodies. And let's
Yeah.
reject culture, this this that tells us that you have to be X size or smaller
Hmm.
to be acceptable. And that, you know, if you're not X size or smaller, you're not healthy and therefore not worthy of respect.
Mm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds, I'm still kind of curious. So the more I hear, the more I want to know.
Yeah.
Like
You want to know.
who, like how do people come to a place like because of the shame that is created, right, by society and the diet culture, and even with the body positive movement, it's still difficult for people to say and or look at themselves in the mirror sometimes, my sensing, and say, okay, I'm gonna reach out, let's say to Rosie, and like what would drive someone to get to a place where they actually reach out and say, I really want to work through liberating myself from this societal expectation of what I should look like and do the deeper work, because it's not just a thought at this
Yeah.
point. It's a way of being that has been, like you're saying, marginalized.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, they talk
Mm-hmm.
in the body trust, or the Center for Body Trust talks
Mm-hmm.
about how there's three kind of main phases of this
Okay.
healing
Mm-hmm.
process. And it usually starts with what they call the rupture, which
Mm-hmm.
is like what was once working, trying to hustle for your worth in the world, is no longer working for you. It's no
Mm-hmm.
longer sustainable, or there's enough of you that's just tired of trying to shrink yourself in every meaning of the word to try to fit
Mm-hmm.
into the world. And, you know, I mean, one, like diets don't work. 95 to 98% of diets end up with no significant weight loss 5 years out. And
Mm-hmm.
so at a certain point, like you can only blame yourself for something that is broken for so long before you start
Yeah.
to question, like, is it really me? I know I'm being told that this product you're selling is not
Mm-hmm.
working because of me, but if it's so widespread that that's not working, where I'm trying and I keep trying and I keep trying this diet and that diet,
Mm-hmm.
this diet, and
Right.
nothing's creating
Which is
sustain.
more messages coming from the external world saying it's on you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of science behind, you know, and theories behind like why that is, but ultimately diets don't work and actually are iatrogenic, which means they cause the thing that you're trying to get rid of. You're statistically more likely to end up
Mm-hmm.
at a higher weight from dieting. It's
Yeah.
like 2/3 of people end up regaining more than they lost in diets, was the statistic that I had seen. And that's, it's like, okay, well then if this is what I think is causing it, and I'm just kind of on this figurative and sometimes literal treadmill that's like making me bigger over time,
Yeah.
then there kind of becomes this like, well, this is broken, what now, right? Like this isn't
Mm-hmm.
sustainable. I'm in a body that doesn't want to be a smaller body, at least not
Mm-hmm.
without starving myself or having an eating disorder.
Right.
Um,
So then you're saying this is kind of phase one. Is that what you called it?
yeah, yeah, the
Yeah. So then
rupture.
this would be kind of like, okay, I noticed that I'm on that treadmill, like you're saying, and I'm trying anything and everything I can. So what then? And that
Yeah.
point, then some people may actually start reaching out for support.
Yeah, I mean, I think people definitely start breaking up with diet culture around then,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that's kind of like you just start listening to podcasts like maintenance
Mm-hmm.
days or food psych or whatever, and there are a lot of really wonderful
Yeah.
um podcasts out there, or you start listening to
Mm-hmm.
audiobooks, reading books, and um kind of getting pulled into like, okay, well, if the matrix is broken,
Mm-hmm.
this thing they've sold me my whole life is a lie, then what? Then what? And
Yeah.
and the second phase of is called the reckoning, and
Okay.
there's a lot of yeah, just kind of reckoning with how much of your life you've given to this lie that doesn't work, and
Mm.
um how there's a lot of grief
Yeah.
in the reckoning for sure. It's definitely like a heavy grief phase because I think it can be really seductive, this idea that if I can just hustle hard enough, I can be in this smaller body that will cure all of my problems, right? Like
Mm.
I will finally be safe and loved in the world, is this lie that we're kind of told. And a lot of the time, you know, when people do hustle hard enough or develop an
Mm-hmm.
eating disorder and manage to get smaller, there's you realize like that's actually not, it doesn't give you the things you thought it would give you, right? And um so some of it is kind of like grieving that idea
Mm.
of the smaller body, or even sometimes grieving the smaller body that you were in at certain points when in your
Mm-hmm.
hustling, right? And grieving the fact that we live in a world that is often unsafe for fat bodies, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and other intersections of identity. I think one of the things that I really love about that training too is there's a lot of um, conversation around
Mm-hmm.
like the liberatory framework, not just for fat bodies, but like for trans bodies, for disabled bodies, for people of color, you know, and
Yeah.
yeah, so there's kind of just like a reckoning with, it's not like there's a reason why I feel unsafe in the world, right? It's not just like I need to just love myself harder. And
Yeah.
there's actually like legitimate reasons why this is hard and scary. Um,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, and the
So
last,
one is okay, go ahead.
no, it's okay. Yeah, the
Okay.
one,
I
the
think I
last,
was trying to just and make sense. You're saying a lot of the grief is letting go of the story
right, yeah,
that you've been told throughout many years, or like again, messages coming through society of how or what your self-worth is. This is what
mhm,
you need to look like in order to be loved and have worth in the world. So
yeah,
letting go of a lot of the efforts that you probably also put in, and a lot of that internalized probably shame and the
yeah,
guilt and unworthiness that you probably feel.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
definitely like a phase
Mm-hmm.
of reckoning with not only like the matrix of diet culture, right? But like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the times coming to terms with the ways you've maybe abused yourself to try
Yeah.
to be
Fit.
lovable and try to
Yeah.
be safe, or like
Mm-hmm.
even the ways that a lot of the time it's family, right? It's family
Mm-hmm.
that's giving you these messages that your body is the problem. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time that's coming from fear, right? Like they're, and
Mm-hmm.
it's, and love, right? Like a lot of the time there is just kind of this narrative that, like, if I can just save you from that discrimination by trying to get you to shrink your body, then
Mm-hmm.
like that is
You
love.
won't suffer as much
Right.
in the world,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Which
that's
is,
creating more suffering
and it's
from not
validating.
being accepted.
Yeah. It's validating this idea that it is your body that's the problem. It's not society. It's not
Mm-hmm.
society's discrimination. It's like, no, actually, you are the problem. And
Mm-hmm.
if you just dieted harder, had better willpower, or blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, then you would be healthy and worthy of love,
Mm-hmm.
respect. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah. So there's, I think the reckoning can be painful, and I think just having somebody to walk through that with you
Yeah.
that gets it. There's not like a lot of the time as like a therapist, when people find me because they are looking for someone to help them with this kind of healing,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one thing, but sometimes I find, I get clients for other reasons, and sometimes it's just planting seeds, like
Yeah.
yeah. And then the last phase is the reclamation, which is really like reclaiming your own worth and value in the world, and reclaiming your own right to live in your body and
Mm-hmm.
love yourself and find community that is, safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would that look like if I were, you know, I'm trying to imagine that phase after all the grieving, after undoing hopefully a lot of that internalized messages that you're receiving from society, family, friends, and then yourself, because now you're in this cycle of, like you're saying, abusing kind of yourself after getting those messages. When you're saying this last phase, I have this sense of like just relief,
Mm-hmm.
or is it harder than that?
I
Just,
think, you know, I don't think that these are as linear.
mm-hmm. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I think there may
In,
be, in an IFS
overlapping.
kind of framework, there might be parts of me that are
Mm-hmm.
fully in,
Mm-hmm.
the reclamation, and there might be parts of me that are still really grieving or
Mm-hmm.
have a really hard time letting go of this idea that, like, maybe I can control this body in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, um, yeah, the reclamation has been a lot more kind of coming to a place of self-love and peace in my body. And I think a lot of that has been, you know, overlapped a lot with the work that I've
Mm-hmm.
done internally for, healing in IFS, right? Like I have a lot more, I'm not as led by like all of these ways that I used to protect myself, right? Even when I
Mm-hmm.
see that part of me that's coming up, that's kind of like monitoring, trying to read who in the room is judging me or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like I have more compassion for that when that comes up, and I also
Yeah.
have a lot more love for that part of myself. And I think when
Mm-hmm.
when that happens too, it just feels different, right? Like it's no longer like hustling for crumbs. It's like reading the room to see who are my people, right? Like reading the room to see like who is safe and worthy of the kind of friendship and love and support that I can offer.
Yeah.
And it's such a different, I think that's such a deeper
Mm-hmm.
I wish I could just jump people ahead to that, but that's like been a really long
journey.
yeah, it's been a long journey coming to that
Mm-hmm.
place where I actually like love myself enough to be able to not feel like someone else is defining my worth in the world.
Yeah,
Right.
you get to do that.
Yeah. And it says a lot more to me about who that person is and where they're at in their journey. Right. And
Yeah.
it's not even from like a place of judgment anymore. It's just like who who gets me, who is actually like who are the people that are invested in healing and growing in the
Mm-hmm.
same ways that I am. Right. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So then I think you're validating also that sense of relief that I felt when you said it. But I like what you're saying. It's kind of like not all or nothing. There are parts of yourself that can actually get there, maybe
Mhm.
quicker than other parts. It is and it's also good for people to know that, because sometimes we're expecting to be at a place, like you're saying, you wish to jump people to that part, but you can't.
Yeah.
And it's good for people to also know that sometimes we get parts of us can get there while we still have parts that are grieving,
Yeah.
and they can coexist.
Hmm.
They can coexist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. And I think like for a long time, my the part of me that used to protect me by trying to
Mm-hmm.
show my body and trying to,
Mm-hmm.
present in an appealing way in the world, really like hustle for my worthiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Used to have like a warring relationship with a fat activist part of me that was like, burn it down. What are you doing? And there was like so much hatred and animosity
Mm-hmm.
between those aspects of myself that polarization was really painful for a time. And then I
Mm-hmm.
think in my own healing, like just it, even those aspects of myself, even those parts of myself have peace between them, right? Like there is
Mm-hmm.
compassion for both parts, right? And they're both trying to protect me in different ways, but it's neither part is trying to harm me, even though that can be the perception, right? Like, well, if you're buying into diet culture, then you're harming yourself, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's like such a, I don't know, that just feels like a protective stance. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's how we're told that we have to protect ourselves for
Yeah.
so much of our lives. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the three phases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of other really beautiful things about that
Mm-hmm.
model. And they actually wrote a book. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but the Center for Body Trust wrote a book that kind of talks more
Mm-hmm.
about a lot of their theory.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, it's called Reclaiming Body Trust, A Path to Healing and Liberation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's by um, by the founders. That organization was founded by Hillary. I'm going to say her name wrong. Hillary Canavy.
Okay.
She's a therapist. Yeah, she's a therapist, and Dana Sturdivant, which I think I'm also pronouncing her last name wrong too, but she's a
Yeah.
dietitian, and they were like a team that kind of
Mm-hmm.
put each other earlier in their working, in their careers, and did a lot of really revolutionary work, kind of bringing minds together
Mm-hmm.
and creating this theory out of this place of like really empowering other voices, right? It's not just,
Mm.
the training isn't just like you're listening to Dana and Hillary lecture, right? It's
Right.
like they have all of these different powerful thought leaders kind of like come and talk and do interview, and they interview them in ways that really like add a depth and robustness to the
Yeah.
training. I think is really beautiful. But yeah, that book talks about the theory, but again, I think it's really experiential. Like you got to go
Mm-hmm.
through it, right? There's no like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to cognitively understand this and then I will be able to be all the way over there, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a long healing process and it takes time.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think when people are on that journey and they're wanting to find a way to be at peace in their bodies at whatever size, and in whatever intersections of who they are, right? It
Mm-hmm.
can be really grounding to have somebody walking that path with you that gets it, right? And that
Yeah.
I can't transmit it. It's like you have to go through it. So reading it isn't going to bring you all
Help.
the right reclamation, right? But
Right.
it gives you more of an idea of
Mm-hmm.
the journey, gives you some like cognitive understanding of what they're
Mm-hmm.
talking about. But I think it's also really beautifully written.
Yeah. So you're saying there's a difference between reading something and knowing versus reading something and having that felt sense,
Experience.
like the
Yeah.
experience of actually going through it
Yeah.
and getting to a point where you can say, okay, here I am far enough. I was gonna say I've arrived, but I'm always cautious because I'm like, have we really arrived? It's a
Mhm.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah, for
So I'm
sure.
kind of ahead in the journey of
Yeah.
who I really want to be and how I want to be in this world versus how I'm told to be in the world. That's beautiful.
Yeah. It took me I think it takes a lot of people a long time to fully
Mm-hmm.
pick up with diet culture. Like there's just so
Mm-hmm.
much, those roots for a lot of us. I don't know. I think
Mm-hmm.
I was asked if I wanted to go on a diet by my mom when I was like three
Mm-hmm.
or four. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was real little, maybe five. I
Yeah.
don't know, somewhere in there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I had been dieting most of my
And
for
sometimes even, yeah, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean
That's
to cut you
okay.
off.
I'd been dieting for a long time and I'd been wanting to find this path, but it took me a long time
Mm-hmm.
to to do it. It
Mm-hmm.
took a long time to be ready, and I didn't take the training until it was ready. I was like, I want to do this training, but I'm not ready to break up with diet culture. I
Mm-hmm.
still want to shrink my body. And
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think when I found out I was having a girl, my second kid is a girl so far as we know. Who knows? Gender is a thing. But at this point, she identifies as a girl, and finding out the sex that she was going to be made me it really set a fire under my butt, because and I think that's often true for people. It's like you don't want to pass that on to your kids, and that creates some urgency for people to do
Mm-hmm.
this work. Like that's when a lot
Right.
of people find it.
Yeah. And that's what I was gonna say when I interrupted you. Like you get the message maybe directly from, like you say, your mom, but then there is also this thing that parents or caregivers are also dieting and the kids see it. And then that's also a way of passing that on to the
Yeah.
child, even if not direct, indirect, and
Mhm.
just like that's how we transmit sometimes a lot of the things that we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to like tell your kids
Mm-hmm.
you're beautiful and worthy and loved at any size while you're hustling to shrink your body.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the time, I mean, I think that it does matter, right? Like even if you're in a place where you are not ready to fully break up with diet culture, not ready to stop trying to shrink your body, I think that
Mm-hmm.
being able to name her kids, actually there was a really There's a really wonderful book I'd recommend. But what I was going to say is naming, like, I'm trying to shrink my body because that still feels safer, but fat bodies are worthy of love, right? Like, all bodies are worthy of love and respect. That still matters. But there's this book that I read recently that I really recommend to parents, called Fat Talk by it's by Virginia Soulsmith. It's called Fat Talk: Parenting in the Age of Diet Culture, and that's a really powerful book for like parents, kind of helping them to even figure out, like, how do you have these kinds of conversations with your kids where you're teaching them something different.
Okay, yeah, so we'll have to get those linked to this so people can actually have the name, the authors, and maybe go get them if they really want to learn more. Thank you, Rosie.
Maybe I could create like a resource page about, with different podcasts or books or whatever.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And thanks everyone again for being here with us. It was wonderful to hear more about this certification, kind of how you got into it and how we can kind of start breaking away from those patterns.
Yeah. Thank you. This was fun.
Okay.